For the upstairs?
Yeah.
Fish. All right.
Cheating mazel tovs. Tut garnished and red mazel tovs.
Last in the hospital, and then
Yeah.
her son's upstairs?
No.
Who's upstairs? Oh, this is
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam. We will first learn the final 2 prakim in Para Aduma, Hilchos Para Aduma prakim Yud Dalid and Tezvav, and we're going to start Hilchos Tumas Tzoras Perek Aleph. Now, the first chapter today, Para Aduma Perek Arba Asar, is really a continuation and an application of the phenomenal Perek we learned yesterday, right? Perek Yud Gimel, with the Ma'alois Isedros, with the real stringencies that we put upon unique Chatos, Paraduma. So we're going to have many applications of it. Perek Arba Asar has 10 halachas. Let us begin with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Kli cheres shehoya ba efer chatos. If you have a klei cheres, and in it you have the ashes, and a source of tuma touches the outer part of a klei cheres. And indeed, the rule is that a klei cheres can only acquire tuma if the source of tuma goes into its inner airspace, which did not happen. So one might think, oh, that will be another chumrah. No, this is not a chumrah. Here, Todd, we'll see what the Rambam is getting at. She'ein klei cheres, this we already know. Mi tamei, mi gabay, even regarding chatos. However, if this keli that has in it the efer chatos was placed begashmias on top of the sheretz, regarding all other dinei tumah v'tara, again, if you put a keli on top of a sheretz, it can be sitting on it. Who cares? The contact is from the outside. It normally would not acquire tumah. Here, afapish takesh ulenit makli, but the efer is on top of a sheretz. Harei ha'efer tamei. As it says, and you can't call the makom a makom tahor. Now, whether this is a derabanan, pasuk is an asmachta, whether it's a deraisa, I don't know, but it's a gavaldika chumrah. Now, lo al gabo sheretz bulvad, el afilu hinichai al gabo oichel, sheni v'chayoytze boy. And as we learned again in Perek Yud Gimel, that oichlin, all oichlin, are considered tamei, and it's metamei the chatos. Even when we're speaking about a sheni, which means midvarim shatum masan tumakala vehem divrei soifrim. So here it's not any oichlin dani. Oichlin is metamei the efer if it has direct contact. Here we're speaking about oichlin that's takatame, even if it's only tamei on a level of sheni, even if it's only tamei midrabanan. This concept of b'makim tahor, hadei nitma ha'efer, because it says b'makim tahor. Shelo yia al gabe shum tuma ba'olam, which should not be on it, even though there's a head, there's a chatzitza. Right. Chen kli cheres, shoye boy efer chatos. V'nosun al aruba shebabayis tamei. Now you have this opening. If you remember, when you have openings in the walls of a house that tamei, what will be normally essential is how large is the opening. If it's a peseach tefach, the tumah can go out. If it's not a peseach tefach, the tumah does not go out. Nevertheless, im hoyahakli mishulshal labayis. In other words, if the keli is attached to something that's outside the house, but it's hanging within the aruba ear space that's within the house, the vart here will be as even though the aruba itself does not have a peseach tefach, nevertheless, nitma ha'efer ba'afal pisha em aruba peseach tefach. Why? Because of this unique thing that we're learning right now, introducing Perek Yud Daled with the makom v'stamei. Ve'im lo yehoyim l'shulshal. If it was not hanging in there, in other words, it was pashut sitting on something. So here we would follow the regular rule. If the aruba has a peseach tefach, you're tamei. Okay, that we get. Halacha beis. Hoya kli sheleven. Atkan, guys, halacha aleph is a klei cheres. Even though a klei cheres cannot acquire tuma migaboy, but it could acquire tumah if the tumah goes into its inner airspace. What happens if you have a keli that's b'chlal not susceptible to tumah? So that should l'chayda create a greater chatzitza. Hoya kleshel even, for example. Now we say bein sheyesh by peseach tefach, bein she'ein by peseach tefach. If, Danny, it's not hanging in the airspace, that's key. Hanging in the airspace, then even if it's in a clay even, it's in a makim tamei. If it's sitting on the sill, not in the house itself, since it's in a keli that is a clay even, for example, here, halachi given. And it's mukav tzamid pasol. And guys, if you remember going back a bit, with the Rambam taught us that not only is a klei cheres nitzoil by a tzamid pasol, but we have like a kal v'chomer to other kelim that b'chlal are not shaykh to tumah. But if that keli root is tightly closed, it's nothing but oil hameis. Again, we're going back to this concept of makim tahar hareho efer, or the mayim tameim. She'eina chatos nitzeles b'tzamid pasol, because of this nekuda of b'makim tahar. So I know the tumah doesn't go in it, but it's not in a makim tahar. Amazing. Halacha dalet. Chein oichlin umashkin shel kodesh. You should also know einam nitzalim b'tzamid pasol. So this is taka not unique. Even though the Rambam never wrote this before, to my recollection, but he's writing it right now. Aval ma'im she'erim mikudashim. Atkan is Ephod, or the consecrated waters. But if you have the waters that were drawn for the Ephod chatos, but they were not yet mikudashim, and ukleirekon, the kelim that are ready for chatos, they are protected with the tzamid pasol. Now it's this din of makim tor, which either physically on a sheretz, or as halacha gimel, if it's not nitzoil, but tzamid pasol is for the ephod and for the mayim mikudash, to the exclusion of what we just mentioned right now.
I'm sorry, is there a distinction between a regular container that's nitzof versus a clean heaven?
No.
Same thing.
Yes.
You take that in an oil that has tumah in it, the water's no good.
Yeah, but I just want to go back to that. The tzamid pasol, the Torah speaks about klei cheres, and the Rambam taught us the limud that we apply it to kelim that are not mekabel tum. There's no tzamid pasol on a metal keli b'chlal. Just remember that, because it becomes tummy from the outside. Okay, another. Yeah. Right. In other words, if you have, look at these ideas. The person and his mayim she'einon mikudashim. If the owners are dear and therefore they become tummy because they are in an oil, right, mace, nifselu hamayim b'chol makim shehein. Look at this idea. Ketzah. And this guy walks into the oil mace. The oil mace now will impart tumah to him. He's under the same oil. It will also impart tumah to the mayim, even though they're not yet consecrated. What is that? Like once the tumah goes into the owner, has more koyach to go into the mayim. Bifnim meaning in a tzamid pasol, now shneim tohirim. But who bifnim? That's the word, Danny. Evamayim bachutz. Rambam wants to emphasize when the owners become tummy, but oil hameis, the waters that they own, kishehu, kishem shehu tamei, kach meim of psulim.
Even if he doesn't touch it?
Even though he doesn't touch it. So people say, what does that mean? So hold on. So here you have to add, the Rambam La'am introduces something without it, like I'm trying to think, well, when I learned this, I thought, what does that mean? If my mind is in a mile away? Yeah. No. If you remember, we learned a din of Hesach Hadas, that whoever is the designated shomer of the mayim, they have to be guarding it. If they're not guarding it, the mayim becomes puzzle because there was no shmira on it. We also learned, if you remember, that someone that's tamei, any person that's tamei is not a qualified shomer. So I want to go like this. Now, if my water would stay at home under lock and key, under conditions where it's already nishmar, or if there's someone else designated to be the shomer of it, it will not become tamei. But if I'm the shomer of the waters, this time you should remember, even though the waters is outside, it doesn't become tamei because it became tamei through two masmeis. But whenever the owners become tamei, they're no longer a valid shomer. So it's waters that are not being shomered. Hesach hadas, that's the pshat over here. That at least helps us understand. Halacha, hey, hator lachatos, shoyu omer al gabe tanur. Guys, good to remember a few things that we learned before. Number one, a klei cheres never becomes an av. Stop to read the Rambam wrote that already before. Another din that a rishon cannot be metame adam midoiraisa, right? A rishon, a vlad cannot make adam kelim tamei. So if I'm standing on top of a tanur, I'm not tamei. Nevertheless, but if the keli that I'm standing on is not a hoidem lachatos, which is all kelim unless they were taken to the mikvah l'shem chatos, upashat yadoi chutz letanor. Upashat chutz letanor. So either we're standing on top of a tanur. Now, we learned in Halacha Aleph, Danny, that there's something called b'makom tahor. Here we're speaking about someone that b'makom tahor that Rambam explained is if the keli is on the sheretz. Here, I'm extending my hand beyond the boundaries of the tanur, so maybe it's not b'makom tamei. Or if you have this rod that is extending over the tanur, but on both edges of the rod, the edges of the rod that are above the ear space of the tanur. So one would have thought it's not called b'makom tamei because it's not on the tanur. No, because still we say it's not directly over the airspace. I don't care. They're both leaning on the tanur, whether it is a stick, whether it is in the hand of the person who's on top of the tanur, as if they are physically over the tanur. And we already introduced in this Perek, b'makom tahor and not b'makom tamei. A klei reikon that's prepared for the chatos, or mayim she'eno mikudashim. This is the second time in this chapter. There we're not that machmer. In other words, what's clear, guys, is that this limud of makom tahor is for the ashes, Danny, or for the mayim that are mikudashim because weiter there are ashes in. If a guy is standing outside this oven, and while there was a movement, it's going over the tanur airspace. He leaned over, he went to the windowsill, and he brought it back to him. Because it was in movement then. It's not b'makom tamei. When you sprinkle the waters, even if the waters in the air flew over tuma mamish. Now, we're not speaking about oil. We're speaking about it went over a mishkav or a moisha. So again, what did we learn in this chapter? Makom tahor, not makom tamei. It's not called the makom. Hareizu tahor because it's moving. Halacha vav. Klishi yesh by mechatos, a klishi yesh by mechatos, and a klishi yesh by kodesh. And shenagu zebozeh. Listen to what's happening. So first of all, what did we learn? Kalim, even though they were tar lekodesh, are de facto tamei for chatos. So nitma klei shel chatos, and therefore anything in it also becomes tamei. But we don't say let it ricochet back. Can't because ricochet because the clay a keli cannot be matamar keli. Avol klei hakodesh toir kishoyom. Chein im nagat toir lechatos B'shtei yadav, kishehi monachim al haaretz. We'll see what's this monachim al haaretz in a moment. So a person that's toil lechatos, right? Harei nitma shel chatos. Why? Listen to this. Sharei hatoil lechatos nitma b'negias hakli she'eino toil lechatos. K'may shebiyarnu. So now the person becomes stomach. Here does ricochet back. And now, well, it's one direction. So here's Danny. So I touch with one hand a keli lechatos, another hand a keli lakoidish. Keli lakoidish is going to be matamami. There's no, we also learned yesterday, there's no limits. It's not tradition shame, we don't count. And I touch now that keli lechatos, and everything, the keli becomes tummy, and whatever's in it becomes tummy. But again, what not? It does not ricochet back. The keli lakoidish remains star. However, that now you'll understand why the Rambam concluded halacha vav with the both on the ground. In contrast, if they're not on the ground. Guys, one keli is a keli sheyesh boy kodesh, Danny. The other keli is a keli that has in it, let's say, the mechatos. So here, what's going to happen? But everything will become tummy. That's called the ricocheting back. Let's go through the steps. First of all, zeshol chatos nitma. Why? How does the keli with the mechatos become tummy? Because I am holding it. I became tummy because I touched the keli that was taka tohar lakoidish, but it was never tohar lachatos. We learned in yesterday's Shapedik Gimel. It's matama me. I'm matama the keli, and that's matama the mine. Okay, now I'm going to explain how it's ricochet backs. Vishel koidish nitma. Mipnei ze shehigbioi v'hu tamei b'nesias me'nidam shei metamim b'masa mipnei shenitma machmas haklei shal kodesh. Now this is something connected that we'll learn more in Perek Tesvav in the final chapter in Paradum in the next chapter. Now that I'm holding on to mechatos that are not tahar, it's going to make me tamei. How? Through masa. There's no maga here. When it's on the ground, I'm not carrying it. The moment I'm carrying it, I become tamei on such a high level that I can now be tamei the keli that's holding the kodesh, and therefore the keli becomes tamei and the kodesh becomes kodesh. So there was no tuma anywhere, but since they made a mala yisei the Perek Gimel that a keli that was not tohar lachatos is metamei adam and kelim that are tohar lachatos. So the tuma begins from the clay kodesh, goes into the person, and goes into the keli, it makes the mayim tameim. Now I'm carrying mayim tameim. Mayim meinida tameim that's being carried is matamed adam. Now I'm tamei, a different type of tuma. That tuma is so strong that I can be matamed the keli that has an ita kodesh. Ricochet.
Just to be clear, where did the tuma originate? In
the keli kodesh that I'm touching, since that keli was not toward lachatos, we learned in Perek Gimel, it's matama me. I went to the mikvah because I want to do the hazah, or I want to do the milud, I want to do the kiddush.
It's actually really tummy.
No, it's not.
On the level of
very weak. And that's why, Danny, if they're both on the ground, it's not going to go on the other, it's not going to go back. It's not, I'm not tummy enough to be matamed backwards. But now that it was matamed the mechatos, if I'm carrying the mechatos, noise mechatos meinida, that's tamei is matama the masa. That's a much higher tumah. And now I can be matama the keli. Okay, right. Lefikach im hoya hakli shel kodesh is karuch b'niyad. If I'm not touching it directly, vigbia b'niyad v'nagaboy. Even though vigbia chatas b'yad shniya. Oh, let's go both ways. Shneim tohayden. How did it begin?
Because it never originated.
So in other words, masa, the din that we learned in Perek Gimel, that any keli, even though it's toilah kodesh, is matama, it's only through nigia, not through masa. So all of this begins, like asking, how did it begin? It began because the clay kodesh was matama. It's only if I touch the keli. If I'm holding it through a nayar is not like kabel tuma per se. So there's an intervention, there's a chatzitza, even though I'm carrying it. So everything is started. But in the other direction, My right hand or left hand is holding on the klei kodesh. Even if the keli within which there is the mechatos, I'm holding it through a paper. Shneim tameim. Because this power of imparting tumah, Danny, is even through masa. Wow. Halacha ches. Hasid means I'm moving. Same concept. Moving something without touching them. Hasid, we already learned in the beginning, I think it was of Tumas Meis, that Hesed is connected to Masa. It's the same concept. Hasid, same idea. Only through touch, like we just mentioned before regarding the paper. But we're not speaking about a kelim that's Roy Lemidras. Roy Lemidras, we learned also in over Shabbos, right, about the turban of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgadol. But that's something else. Halacha test. Kol sfeik hatuma is now we're going to learn the final topic of this chapter. We just to remind ourselves, when there's a suffix tuma, as we already see the whole time, not all sfeikas are the same. Benegeto truma, there are certain sfeikas that are so powerful that even though the truma, guys, truma, yeah, you're not allowed to burn. Truma tameya, you have to burn. There are times that a suffix truma halachically is considered such a big suffix, they have to be soid of the truma. That's the exceptions. The normal rule is that whenever you have a suffix, you're not allowed to burn the truma. Toilet, you can't burn it because it might not be tummy. You can't eat a toilet. Then you have certain sfeikas that are such halachically weak sfeikas that they're b'chlal not the tummy, the truma at all. You can get to eat it. Okay, I want to focus on the toilet. See, the unique is truma has kedusha. And you're not allowed to burn it unless you know that it's tummy. Mechatos, even though there's so much kedusha in it, etc., there's no prohibition in spilling out mechatos. You can ruin it. So the Rambam is going to see how that works now. Halacha test. Kol sfeik atumas. If it's a level of suffix that's such a halachically weak suffix, that the truma remains so okay that you get to eat it. We're going to learn more details about that later. That level of suffix truma by echatos also will not render the mechatos invalid at all, and you can use it. But the whole has feikos that are only suffix enough, and that's the majority, where we're going to say, if that level of suffix comes to the mechatos, we don't say toilen by mechatos. Because mechatos, even when they are tahoidim, if I spill them out, I'm not violating anything. Now, if you did not spill them out, you use the mechatos that it has a suffix tumah of a level that by the truma it would be toilen, and then you were matayed adam or kalim. And now you have taharos. So what do you do now, Danny? Those taharos has to be toilen. In other words, if you did not nishbach it, there's a suffix where we don't know. So if a person or a keli became tar through those mechatos, now we extend that down. They might be tar, they might not be tar. We don't know. Also, kachin, if you don't know for sure whether it's tamei or tar, you may not burn it, but you may not eat it. And a chanami. No, it's the only place where we say that a suffix, which for truma would only be toilen, we say by mechatas nishpachim, that's only by the mayim themselves, because there's no sin in spilling the waters. But if you were to use it, then that suffix continues. Another rule regarding a type of keli, so hara fafais, rafters, whatever this means, they are not like kalim, and therefore, so when we learned in Perek Yud Gimel that all kalim are de facto tamei, unless they were taken to the mikvah specifically lechatos, that's if it's a keli. Rafters are not considered kalim at all. That's a good thing. Final halacha in this Perek, halacha Yud, teveila shel truma. If you have a dried fig of truma that falls into the mechatos, what happened right now? Now you were machshir that devela to become tamei, and you took it up. So listen what's going on. Listen to what happened over here. If the size of the dvela is the size of a beitza, what's the magic of a beitza when it comes to tumas oicholin? a food, even when it is tamei, can only impart tuma if it has the size of a kezayis or more. So if that devela had that size, it had the ability to be metama the mayim. Ben shahoisa had the devela tameyam. Ben shahoisa tohira. How did the mayim become tamei? We learned this in Perikut Gimel. That oichlin that touches the main nida metama the mayim. Again, we're speaking of ricocheting. But the oichel is tar. But it was metama the mechatos because that's the rule. Oichlin is metama the mechatos. But for that, you have to have oichlin on the size of a kibetza. So now, shkol oichlin, afilo oichel kodesh, eino toyer lechatos. So now, if it was metama the mayim, Danny, it's metama. Forget about the mayim. Yeah. Metama the mayim. A person who touches it now becomes tamei. If I touch it now, I become tamei. I did negiah, as we learned before by the holding of the two cups. So now I become tamei on a level that's a doiraisa. I'm chayav misa. That's a big statement. By the way, I'm not going to be chayav misa for eating this devela. You know why? Because when do we say that if a kohen that's tamei who eats truma or kachim, the chayav kadas, chayav is v'leishamayim. You know when that happens, Danny? If the food is tohira. Here, the food is tamei. The point that Rambam wants to make by this is that this koyach that oicholin has to make the mayim tameim, so the food is tamei now. The person who holds it becomes tamei. That's a biblical tuma. And if they were to eat truma tohoira, they will be chayav misa. Pnei she'achal truma hu kvar nitma b'meinida. Again, how did the meinida become tamei, Danny? Because it touched oicholin. And oicholin and the size of a kibetza will impart truma. Now, if this devela doesn't have that shear, so even though we said that oichlin afilu lekodesh is matama chatos, the oichlin has to have that amount of a kibeya. So then hamayim b'toharasa, and therefore finished. She'eno oichlin matamas achedim achi by kibetza. Bein lo truma, bein lo kodesh, even lechatos. So now, if a kohen is going to eat this devela, Danny, he did nothing wrong. He didn't do anything wrong because the devela remained tohira, the adam remained tohira, and if he eats other trumas, he's vited okay. But the moment the oicholin that fell into the mei chatos has the size of a kabetza, so then we apply what we learned in Perikut Gimel, that the oicholin is matama the mayim, and now that I have contact with it, I will become tamei as well. If I'm a kohen, I may not eat truma tohira under the penalty of chimisa b'dei shamayim. Chavra, we're going to start the final chapter of Paraduma Perek Tezvav. We're no longer going into details of the Chumras. It's a standalone chapter. It's big, the big idea. And actually, when the Rambam began Paraduma, he gave two, right? The final mitzvah, the final topic is the koyach of the main nida that's metahed esatameim. It has the power to be metama the tohirim. And here we're going to learn clearly Shitas Rambam, Machlekes Rishonim. But the sheet of the Rambam, it's not always metahed the tohirim. The concept that metame the tohirim, that only happens if you were noigeya. These are the words. That will be the big topic of this chapter. Perek Chamisha Asar again has 10 halachas, beginning with halacha al. Hanegeya b'meichatos. That's the key words now. Shaloi l'tzoyrech hazah. Now, I'll give you an example. Shaloi l'tzarech hazah means there's no one tummy here. Danny, transporting it for it to be in a safe place is called tzarech hazah. You have to get the nuance. Shaloi l'tzarech hazah means that there's no reason for this to be moved. There's no reason for this to be touched. Not I have to guard it better. Not I want to get it in that region, in that city. Sometimes you want to have mayim available in this location. That's called tzarech hazah. Stam, you stam moved it. There's no stam. You stam move it, you become tummy. Now, whether it was touched by an adam, whether it was touched by kalim, the person or the kalim becomes tummy. Now, guys, halka. What level is the mayim tummy? Av, which means that when I become tummy, then what level will I be? Rishon, guys, this is midoiraisa. which also just means I just need to go to the mikvah and wait until what night. If that would be the case, if I am wearing clothing, even though I'm wearing the clothing while I'm noigeya, will my clothing become tamei? So we'll see, it depends. In the case of just touching, is even while I'm touching it, if I'm holding a keli or if I'm wearing kelim, in some cases, then I want to add, in some cases, the begadim on me will not become tummy, which, by the way, fits the pattern. It fits the pattern because, again, the main nida, if it's shaloi l'tzoyrech is right away an av, I become a rishon, I cannot be mekame kelim. Shenemar v'hanegeh b'mei mida, only the negeya is yitma ad. That's another proof. Yitma ad is a raya that the main nida only has the power of an av. If the main nida would have a higher level of tuma, then the negeya would have to wait 7 days. Okay. And therefore, another detail, but tumas magon doesn't matter how little liquid, even the smallest amount of liquid. Now, that it's not metame, the begadim that I'm wearing, it's not metame, the kalim, or begadim that I'm holding while I'm touching the water. That's only if the amount of water that I am moving, that I'm touching shaloi l'tzoyrech, is less than the minimum amount of water needed to do an act of hazaya. But and as we learned, that you have to be able to dip the ideal aguda and not to have to smear the water off the bottom of the keli. If you have that amount of water or more, then while I am noigeya b'mei nida, my kelim, the begadim that I'm wearing, the kelim begadim that I'm touching, they also become tummy. Metamin b'mago b'masa. First of all, not only metama b'mago, also b'masa. So that's number one. Number two, v'hanegeh b'hem oishunosam shaloi l'tzoyrech. So then metama begadim b'shas magoy b'shas masoy. So a double thing. It does it in part tuma maga or masa. If you remember yesterday, we learned in Pedicure days all those new ones. Sometimes with maga, sometimes maga or masa. If it's less than the shir of azah, only metama b'maga. And even when it's metama b'maga, it stops by the person. If there is a kedei hazoya, not only is it metama me, even if it's indirect, even if it's only masa, but when I have that contact, the clothing that I'm wearing also becomes tummy. The moment I stop carrying the meinida, now farther, I'm only a rishon. I cannot be metama adam and kalim. So that's the stira. Now, in one time it says that means only the person, not the begadim. Here it says that hamazeh. What does hamazeh mean? So that's the problem, guys. When you read this pasuk, how do you understand it? That every time you sprinkle the waters, you become tamei, and your begadim become tamei. No, says the Rambam. Doesn't make sense. None of this has to make sense. But the Rambam says here we say can be because imtiar ala tamei kavochem shiyahu tar. That when it says in the Torah that the one who does the sprinkling or mazamenida doesn't mean he did the sprinkling. It means that if he had contact with enough mayim, kedei hazoyo. Now, Tomei, and not only are you Tomei, even though you're only Tomei on a level of a Rishon, but the begadim that are on you or anything that you are touching at that time becomes Tomei, and that's the Torah. The Kama who shared Hazaya, Kadei Sheyitboil, Roshi Gevoilin, Shal Ezov Bamayim, and when you pick up the Ezov, there is water on it that you can spritz off. Guys, halkop, this man shenaga bohen, oy nisaan, shaloi l'tzoyrech, koydem sheyasu mitzvasan. Another qualification. Aval achash asu mitzvasan. Eina metamin klal. For example, Ketzat, and it was already sprinkled, thrown on Adam or on Kalim, and now and some of that water is now rolling off the person, and it's going on the ground. Right? If it never hit the person, Rabbi Zajac, In other words, you're throwing it, some of the water went straight on the floor. Here also, it's called the waters that the mitzvah was on. And therefore, or is completely taught. For example, I want to sprinkle a behema or clay avonim, right? That's called, if you remember, guys, we learned this, I think, Friday. That tefillah is called the tefillah psula. When we learned the chapter of kavana, kavana also means if I dip it in to do an act that's not necessary, the tefillah is psula. But if you, that was a pedicure. But you know what? The mayim is ksherim. The mayim are ksherim, not mayim psula. So here, as long as the mayim are ksherim, they still have the power to be metame b'maga ubamasa, as we began in this chapter. Lefikach, yes, metamin tumas meichatos. If they were touched, shloi l'tzoyrech. If they were carried, if they had the amount of b'chtei hazoya, shloi l'tzoyrech. Lefi shloi yasam mitzvasam. No, it's this qualification is only if the mitzvah was not. The mitzvah was done. They're not metame. So the Rambam is bringing beautiful that thing of pedicure, that there are times that the tefillah is psula, but whenever it's only the problem with the dipping, if the mayim remains still usable, that's called mayim shelo yasu mitzvasim, and they are able to be metame. In other words, it's not called nasu mitzvasim. Why was the tefillah psula? Because it was not necessary. So loy nasu mitzvasim. Masha enkein, if I sprinkle the water on you, even the droplets that never hit you, they fell straight on the ground, you call nasu mitzvasim. And they no longer can be metame. Halacha beis. In other words, the beauty here is, we mentioned the Shabbos, that in the times when we had access to the mechatos, as we learned in Perek Gimel, you realize how difficult it was to be able to handle it without becoming tummy. So we said Shabbos yesterday, you went to the mikveh. It was not just that. You have to go to the mikveh, you have to wait until it's night. The hazoya has to be done by day dafke, if you remember. So to get to a place where you can have a person that's taught, sprinkling the mayim, it was very difficult. We have to demolish your seders. So what they did was they had these waters guarded in certain locations, and every day, like in big cities, someone that was designated to do the hazoya would open up the window there, and all of the people at a certain time who needed to have the water sprinkled on them, they would walk on the street underneath. And this guy would dip the waters in. You have to have kavanah for every individual. You don't have to know their name. You see who they are, and you sprinkle it on Adam Balkain. But what happened was that since there were mass sprinklings, so there was a lot of water on the ground. Lest you think that if someone slipped and they hit the ground, they touched the waters, they'll never become tummy. Because of what we just learned, that once nasu mitzvasan, they cannot impart tuma. Halat halacha beis. Ein meichatos mitamen es hakoil koine she'asu mitzvasan. Ad sheyiu tohoirim uksherim lahazoya. The din that the meichatos is mitame is only if it's tohoirim and kesherim. Meaning, avol meichatos shenifsulu, not like the case in halacha aleph where the tefillah was psula. That was the whole word. The mayim were kshedim, they can be matami. If the mayim are puzzled, one example, the smallest amount of mayim, even mayon, got mixed into a barrel of 1,000,000 gallons of mechatos. The ganze Sache is invalid. Or as we learned, if an animal, almost all animals other than the yoina, when they drink, so there is a coming and going, some of the drool falls in there. Now, if the waters are psulim, in naga bohem hatohoid letruma. What did we learn also? Nitma. He becomes tamei. Ben shanaga biyada, ben shanaga mishal gufay. Naga bohem adam hatoy lechatos. I feel biyada. So remember this, guys. So first of all, generally we say, right, as the Rambam began in halacha beis, that if the mayim is psulim, it cannot be metame. But the Rambam is adding a nuance that someone who's tahir letruma, someone who's toyer letruma, who touches this waters, will become tummy. Why will he become tummy? Because of what we learned in the previous chapter, I think. Because any person who touches the mechatas, even though here the psulim made a tummy, he became tummy. If a person that is tahor lechatos that cannot impart tumah to the mayim now touches the mayim cannot make him tummy, even though the contact was shaloi l'tzoyrech, because the mayim is psulim. Halacha gimel mechata shenitmu. You get it, Danny. Just to repeat that, you have to get that. Mechata shenitmu. So first, halacha beis, guys, how cup is mayim psulim. We're learning different things now. Mechatas, that's tummy. Not puzzle, tummy. No, Gabehem, Achashinitmo, Odamatoya, Letruma, Baby, Yoda, Baby, Gufoi. We say Nitmon. We say Nitmon. The ganze person becomes tummy. In the beginning of halacha, in halacha base, we say Torah lechatos, who touches mayim psulim. Tahor, right, Danny? Here, if a Torah lechatos touches mayim that are tamei, nitma. Okay? Naga b'shar, that's only if you touch it with his hands. But naga b'shar gufay, hanei otar kamay shahayom. Halacha dalet, mechatos shenaflu l'teichen mei mayon, oy mei mikvay mei peiros. And what did we say? The mayim becomes Danny psulim. But now let's go on. Then they still have the ability to be mitamin b'masa. The imroiv may peiros, they are not mitame at all. And if it's mechza al mechza, they are mitamin. Efer para shenasar be'efer mikla. Here again, what happens? We said that the afer becomes not good, and the kiddush bekulam, and you sanctify the water with this mixture. So here again, im hoya haroiv afer para, then mitamin kemenida, the ability for these waters to impart tumah, the tumah pedek tezvav. If you're negeya, shaloi l'tzoyrech, continues. If roiv was afer mikla stam ashes, but they because I can argue you did not touch the Efer Para, but if you carried everything, you also carried some of the Efer Para. It's matamayu. Halacha hey Efer Kasher. Shenosnei al gabe yamayim. But the problem was that the waters are not ro'oy in lekachon. You didn't have mei mayon, but you have in here the ashes. Now the question is, does this ability for the mayim, for the ashes, to be matamayu when you touch the cheloi l'tzoyrech, do we apply it? No, yes, it's matamayu. No, so really, it's in other words, halacha hey is like the din of mayim that are psulim. Same thing. Halacha. Once the waters became pasul, don't use them as making bricks, making cement. Why? Because like we mentioned, maybe someone is going to now touch the bricks. If you touch it, what does it do to you? It's matamaya, it's matamaya. Shemei chatos einam b'teilim b'tit. Because the Torah uses a word chatosi, from that chatos, whether it's extra, whether there's another way of learning, Chazal learned that it never becomes bottled. So any mayim that has the koyach to be matama, you get rid of.
Yes, pull it out.
Yes, Allah Chazayin.
If you use it or it's inexistent, then it will always be the person that touches it.
Yes. Para shushas mechatos. Af shaloi l'tzorech, and it's shaloi l'tzorech, Danny, because.
What if you throw it into the ocean?
No, that's not a problem. It just means ein b'teilum when you put them into a cement. Yeah, you can compare it. It's still there. Cement is made out of a mixture of this and that. Doesn't lose its identity. Okay, halacha zeh. Para shushas mechatos. If a cow drank the mechatos, Now we learned interestingly, but remember Tuma Belua, that if something is ingested in an animal prior to 24 hours or by the caliph prior to 72 hours, halachically it's not considered fully digested. Now let's come back over here. The mayim is not bottled in a brick, but if an animal drank water and you shechted the animal within 24 hours, I mean halachically the waters were not digested. So Danny, do we say psarim is tummy? No, psarim is tahor. Here we say because it says l'mishmeres l'mei nida b'zman she'im shemurim ein b'telim. Aval b'zman she'shasa para batlu sharei einam shemurim. So in a brick, in cement, in a cow is nishtas al bazach. Here's the window that we refer to a few times. They have these windows. They open them up and they spritz at everyone. And and you went into the Beis Hamikdash. Now, what did we just learn, Danny? That mayim psulim will be metamayu, right? So you now discovered that the mayim is psulim. Oh, it also means that you had your tumah. You entered the Beis Hamikdash in a state of tumah. That's the issue. And was so no b'mezid chayv kares. The shoygig, that's one of the three carbon oil of the It's at the end of Parshas Vayikra. This is not even called a shoygig. That's called an oinus. Harei zapater. Because all of these waters that are being sprinkled by someone for the rabbin, there's such a strong chazaka that people know what they were doing, and everything should be okay. Shecheskas hamayim shemazim mehem ala rabbim that are kshedim, and therefore you're like an oinus. However, but if it was not a communal type of hazah, if it was a yachid doing it, and we learned so many dinim, not everyone is familiar and able to upkeep the standard. And now you enter the Beis Hamikdash, now you're not amazed. And now it comes out to the Mayim Apsulam, which means, Dana, you were never taught from your Tumas Meis. We're learning so many difficulties to keep these waters good. Now, machlikin hayu ha'am b'mayim sheshoysesin ba'aretz mechalayin shel ram v'darsin oisam. When people would de facto slip on that street that went under that window, they threw so much water that people would slip and they would accidentally touch the water. That's not a problem. Then if it would have been psulim, then the negiah would make you tamei. Just like we have a chazaka that the mayim took away your tumas meis, to the point that if you discovered otherwise you're an oinus, we don't have any chashash that the mayim imparted tumah, because the water that's on the ground are mayim that shekvanasa mitzvasa. If it would have been psulim, it would still be makama your yadayim, and through that pure
water, but it didn't land on a person.
We learned that in this chapter. Doesn't matter. It's called nasa mitzvasa. Halachates hamazer be'ezoi hatame. We learned to Shabbos. When you harvest the ezoi, if you would have in mind that you're cutting it off the ground, la achila, it's crazy. That ezoi touching the mechatos would make the mechatos tamei. So hamazer be'ezoi hatame lechatos, which by the way is tar la kodesh. But I'm saying lechatos. So im yesh kabetza, the size of the ezoi. It's all about ricocheting. So then, hamayim psulim, aber hazayosa psula, ein boy kabetza. The mayim are kshedim, meaning it's not metamayu, but nevertheless hazayosa psula. Why is that? Why is that? Because the ezoi itself is tamei.
Why doesn't it impact the water?
Because it doesn't have the size of a kibetza to impart, but it acquires. And that's shita sarambam. In other words, that's the whole machlekes rishonim. The shear of a kibetza, is it even to acquire? No, only to impart. So it cannot impart tumah, but it acquires tumah. And when the Torah says v'hiza hatoir ala tamei, v'hiza hatoir ala tamei, doesn't only mean that the adam has to be tor. It means that the hisab has to be tor. Okay. Ve'ezav zeh metamei chavei v'chavei chaveiroi afilo heimeya Once the Azov has the power to impart, that's we learned, guys, in Pedic Yud Gimel. Once it makes a Adam Tameh, then if I touch you and you touch someone else, 100, we are all Tameh Lachatos. And the final halacha Yud Hamagbia Kli Shehuza Aleph. You pick up a keli, right, upon which you have this water that was sprinkled. V'harei all of mine kadei hazah. Even if there's a huge amount of liquid, you're still okay. Because shahamayim she'asu mitzvasan, even though the guy sprinkled way more than needed, doesn't matter. The waters were used. It affected a proper hazah. The person became tard, then eina metamim, as we began this chapter, and a big mazel tov to the Messiahim, B'rich Rachmana D'Sayon. I think the best thing is not to become Tommy to Meis, because getting out of it is only B'nai Shalom. Chavra, a big mazel tov. We are starting a new series. We're going from good to great. If you think Paraduma was Freilach, you cannot imagine Tumas Tzoras. So everyone has to put on a big smile over here, and we are learning the most amazing parts of the Torah. Interestingly, that when it comes to Tumas Tzoras, right, the final Mishnah in Pedic Aleph of Chagiga divides all of the mitzvahs into three categories, right? So you have that which is called Oisius Tuluim Ba'avid. I'm going backwards. That means that the Torah doesn't even allude to anything, like Hakadas Nadarim, as the Gemara gives an example. Then you have most of the Hilchos Shab, most of the halachas of the Torah. It's called Hararim Hatuluyim B'Seyar. If I'm not quoting the Lashon, I stand corrected, but it's the concept that the Torah says, don't do work. But nervous then the Torah doesn't define what that means. So you have mountains, but at least there's a thread. And then you have the mitzvahs that the Torah Pashut writes about the Fedish. One of the examples is Tzoras. And that means even without the Torah Shabbat Peh, when you open up the Chumash, there is a ribuy prate halachas that are explicit in the Torah. The Alter Rebbe explains why is the taka so? Because the Torah Shabbat writes explicit that part of the Torah that's the most relevant in the world of Atzilus. And Korbanos is something that happens in Atzilus, and people argue, Tzoras sounds like a Tumah. No. Adam, the Torah begins with the words Adam. Adam is the highest definition of a man, right? That Mashiach is called Chivra. The Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe explains that the Tumah of Tzoras, which is a Tumah Chamura, is only Shach to Tzadikim. You have to be on a very high level that any type of contact with impurity is only external, and it's externalized on your skin. We don't have Tzoras nowadays because we have a much deeper level of Tumah. But be that as it may, let's Tumas Tzoras, as we'll see. We're going to begin in the first chapter learning the 4 maris of Tzoras, and we'll see what they are. The Rambam describes them very well. We're going to learn the klal that it has to be Mara Hanega has to be Amoik B'Oid Habasa. We're going to learn the minimum size of this afflicted area, and then we're going to learn the 3 simanim. Not only does the skin have to be afflicted with one of these 4 maras of white, but there has to be another siman. And it can be 3 other simanim. Number 1, the skin is discolored. The number 2 is one of the 3 when it comes to Nega Habasa. That will be this chapter. We're going to begin with the Kaiseres. Hilchos Tumas Tzoras says that Rambam yesh b'chlol and shmoine mitzvahs. Sheish mitzvahs aseh u'shtei mitzvahs lois aseh v'zeh u'prata. Number 1, l'hoirois mitzvahs adam kedina tshuva b'tayno. Number 2, shelo yakot simani tuma. Right, that's a simple way out. And by the way, there are exceptions, right? One of the lamudim we have is that if a baby is born with a punta tzoras on the makim of the bris milah on the arla, you cut it off. But that's the exception. Normally, you can't resolve it by cutting it out. Number 3, shelo yigala chanesek. That means if the blemish is with the hair, as we'll see, you can't resolve it by shaving off the hair. Number 4, shiyam matzoida. It should be mafursam. Everyone should know that this is a matzoida. How does he advertise? Number 1, because he walks around with rent garments, with his hair covered and not cut, and and he has to wear a certain type of cloak all the way up to his lips, as the Rambam will describe. Halacha 5 is now that tahara of the tzoras. Number 6, that sheyigalach hametzoid as kol sa'arei. Kol sa'arei, what does the Gemara tell us? The only thing that he doesn't cut are the eyelashes. Can you imagine? Mamish, everything, like a prune. That's the expression in English. Kishayitar. Number 7, the dinim of tzoras habeged. And number 8, din tzoras habayis. Ubir, mitzvahs elu will be The Prakamelon, God willing, this will take up the whole week. If I'm not mistaken, only Shabbos, we're going to move. This is so good. I think Shabbos we move. I think the next one is Mishkav Moshe.
Even better.
Even better. Okay, so hold on. Perek Rishon has 11 halachas. I can say like this. Today, we just finished Paraduma. The nuances, the Maga, the Masa, Maim Sulam, Maim Tameim. The beginning is always easy. This chapter is mamash easy. It's, the klal is easy. The pratim, not that it's hard. The pratim is pratim. Okay. Halacha al. Soras oir habasa. Now this is important because these signs of leprosy can appear in many parts on the human body. There are parts of the body that's called the parts of hair, or for a man, parts of a beard. That's a different dinner. Here we're speaking about the simanei soras that appear on the oir habasa, which is the rive of the body, where even though you can have small little hairs, adarabah, they can be part of the problem, but your wrist, that's called oir habasa. What is it? Number one, who sheyalben b'kayim in ha'oir, that an area of your skin turns white, and the tia halav nunis, and the shade of the white is at least kikrum beitza. So there's the outer shell of an egg, which is what we are not referring to. But if you make a hard-boiled egg, it's easy to see it then, and you crack the egg open. So it's common that you'll notice the skinny membrane that is also enveloping the egg. It's whitish. That is the minimum whiteness of the shade. The krum beitza ulamayla. The ulamayla is, as we'll see in a moment. There are 4 maris, and the lightest one, that's still in the category of tzaras, of the white part of the simon, the first simon of the 2 simanim, is called kekrum beitz. Abol lavnunis. But even if the skin turns whitish, but it's a shade of white, that's deya mikrum beitz olamato, that it's not as white, it's lesser than that, einoy tzaras. And the word that we will use, that the Torah uses, which is why we use for that, is called boyhak, right? Boyak, who the Torah says, parach ba'ar tohiru. Boyak means white, but not white enough. A dimmed white. Now, we said kekrum beitza, but we're going to make shades. And now, says Rambam, halacha beis, v'arba maris yesh b'tzoras oir habasa ve'eloheim. When it comes to maras hadam, even though we learned together in the Gemara that really the Mishnah says there's only 5 maras that are tameim. And if you take out the black, if I'm not mistaken, there's only 4, which means David HaMelech, he was like the biggest expert. Even when we would call that red, it's now from the Makkah, but it's not one of those 4 shades. Women were tahira. That's the whole story, that there was 1,000 women came one day, which is normal. Today in Bati Dinim, we have the same numbers in Bnei Brak and Yerushalayim. And everyone was tahira. Remember, people on Moitzi Laz, they said he's too lenient. Remember that Gemara? So he says that he gave a bracha that all of these women, once you pass them there, will be tahira, they'll be with their husbands, they will all get pregnant. If, God forbid, he made a mistake, they'll have a girl. That's what he gave. And they all had boys. But I'm saying now, we lost some of that Messiah. We lost some of that Messiah. Because you can't learn it from the book, even though the Mishnah tells you, remember, the Gemara gives you how to get those colors. Here also, we don't have this Messiah because we don't practice Tzoras nowadays. But at least you describe it very clear. These are the 4 colors. Maris. Loiden as beyoisen, and we're going malmayla lamata. The most intense, the whitest of the white. Is that which looks on the skin like snow. Now, when you're on, you have to know one klal. And I want to go back to Maras Adam, that you have to understand something. That when you're looking for a color, just realize this: we know we are human beings with the flaws of a human being. We always make contrast. Whenever Chazal speak about it, the whitest is when it looks like snow. I want you to know that if you're looking at the same color, certain people's skin are very albino. It can look to you not so snow anymore because the contrast is not that great. So a computer doesn't have that flaw. But the Rambam is going to write that clearly soon. It's just to be aware that when you're looking, if it looks like snow, don't think that when you look at something and to you or to me it looks like snow, doesn't mean that's it. It has a lot to do also with what is it on. And it's on an average white person's skin.
So it changes according to you.
To you doesn't change. Objectively, it doesn't change, but mamish, that's the way it is. That's called baheres. Guys, remember the words. Loiven, that's one notch down. This is so much easier than paradum matzamachaya. Nira, and what does it look like? They have to push it, go to a farm, and Kavan's picture is not going to help you. You have to look at a white wooled lamb on the day it was born. That white is like very white. That's called se'es. Loiven shedeya mina se'es ma'at. One step less than se'es. Se'es is already less than the baheres. And then what does it look like? Like the sit of the hechel. Now that's for that you have to have a hechel. They used to, if you remember, they used to put sid on the hechel once a year before Pesach. Who told us habaheres? And that's called sapachas. Now the word sapachas is a generic word. And also have obviously told us a tulda. Really, there's two colors, beheres and sehes. Remember that. The tulda would mean it's a little bit less than that. Will always be called sapachas. So really, if you want to be medayik, you can call this sapachas of the sehes. And reloiven shadeyam misida hechel ma'at, which is kekrum beitza, is the tuldas of a sehes. That's also called sapachas. I'm sorry. You have tuldas beheres. Tuldas beheres is considered hechel. Loiven beitza is called the sapachas of the sehes. These are the four matters.
So they're both called sapachas.
Yes, sapachas is a tulda.
Darker called tulda.
Yeah. So now the question. Now, hold on. If you have a bunch of, if you're going to take any color, which today we have machines to do that, and you divide them into different shades, stronger, or like whiter. The Torah dafka doesn't say between here and here it's all tummy, even though they combine together. The Torah wants us to know the names. We divide them into these four steps. So we're going milmata lamayla. Loiven beitza, sida hechel, chayra. You have it's semer of a keves ben yoim, and you have shelek. Know the names. Call them by their name. Kine lamada toshamara shu kesida hechel. Sapachas beheres. The mara kekrum beitza sapachas seis. Because sapachas is a generic, ain't lashon sapachas elot feilu. Mikan omru maras hanegoyim shtayim shein arba. Beheres v'sapachto seis v'sapachto halacha gimel. Even though they're four, they're one. Arba maras hanegoyim elu kulam mitzdarf from zemzeh, and they're mitzdarf in all levels. Bein lahakel, bein lahachmer, bein mitchilas riyas anegam bein basoif hashiva. We're going to get to the week. Or if he became a nechlat, we'll explain all that as we're going to unpackage this. Kate said, for example, echad nega. You call a loivin kasheleg, or all of it is considered hechel, or all of it is considered naki. All of it is kekrum beitzai. That's the right seder. Now min ma'ilo lamato. The echad nega shehoyim mixas haloivin kamara beheres, umixas kamara seis, umixas kamara sapachas. Even though it had the minimum size, you need all of that area in the skin to be white. It's all white, but not the same shade. We combine them. The answer is you have to know what you're looking at. Such a coin should not see the nega as the chacham. By the way, we're going to learn that if you have a non-expert coin and you have a non-expert who is a coin, and you have an expert who's a non-kohen, they both have to work together. But here we're speaking about the ideal. Getting a kohen who's an expert, he's not called an expert. That's step number one. You want to go learn these dinim. It's about sitting in a beis din that they're looking at maras hanagoyim, and you have to get shimush there until you become an expert in defining the name of the color that you're looking at. Halacha dal. Now, guys, listen to this then. You have in this shade of white a little bit of redness, not polka dotted. Redness mixed in it. Think about, guys, if you have paint. Think about that. And in paint or in milk, you put a drop of blood. So the whiteness is the whiteness of milk. But then there's a tinge of red. That's how we're going to define it. So if there is a little bit of redness that's mixed all together with that whiteness, you know what? It's hard to imagine. You have to push it, sit in a place. First, they show you thousands of the matters of white, of all these 4 levels. And then you will become, everyone becomes expert. It's just a matter of practice. Then they have to add this redness in it. So will it change the shade? Yes, it will. But if you're expert enough, you'll know what shade was it prior to the redness. That is what it means. And now, v'hamare hazeh, either any one of the 4 colors that also has that's really a mixture. What you're looking at, Yisrael, what you're looking at is one color. But what is it made of? One of the 4 whites with red mixed in it. That's called pasuch, and that's mitame. You have to be a big expert in maras for this. The Kate said mara pasuch bar maras elu. The Rambam wants people to train by giving these simanim. Keilu hein arba koisos. I know a standard kois is a revis that is filled with milk. V'nis orei ba'kois harishona, 2 drops of blood, and you mixed it all together. And then in the other one, in every cup, no, it's in every revis. In one of these, put 2 drops of blood. In another cup, put 4 drops of blood. In the third one, put 8 drops of blood. In the fourth, put 16. Hapasuch shebabaheres 6. Hu amara horavi. Hapasuch shebaseis kamara kois ashlishus. Hapasuch shebasapachas habeeres kamara kois ashniya. Hapasuch shebasapachas haseis kamara hakois harishoina. Counterintuitive. Halacha kol amara se'elu bein alav and bein hapasuch mitztarfim zem zeh ukamara echadem chashuvim ubein shahoya hanega kol ilavim ay miksas ilavim adam dam. Again, here also hakal kamara echatu bein lahaka bein lahachma. At least it's simple. Halacha is like halacha above. Kol mari tzaras oira basar. Another rule: before we get into the second siman, there always has to be the second siman. But when we're just going into, so now that we defined all of the different original 4 shades, and then we added now this concept of pasuch, now there's another factor, and that is it has to appear that way. In other words, the healthy flesh looks like it's higher, and this discolored appears to be deeper. Look at the sefer that you're learning at. Hashem made that beteva. We're reading a printed sefer. There's no diyoi protruding up. The white looks deeper. Look in your book right now. If you look at your letters in the sefer that you're looking at, even though the chayenus now have a beautiful not white, which is easier for the eye to look at, it looks deeper, right? It looks as if the black is on top. That's what has to happen. And the meaning of deeper is not that there is a certain mamashasdika protruding or indentation of the white. No, it means just appearance. Just like a marachama, haniris la'ayin, it looks deeper than the shade. Dark looks higher. Why does dark look higher, Suli? Because Al Pi Kabbalah, the Ramak says that black is Kesed. Kesed is on the top. Maybe there's another reason. Okay. Even if that shade was the right shade, but for whatever reason, it did not look deeper, right? Or even worse, the white looked higher than the rest of the skin. It's going to be like any other rash. I know normally rashes you think red. I don't care the color of the rash. Has nothing to do with the netzoras. Okay. Shiur kol nigetzoras. Ben tzoras adam, ben tzoras begadim. We have to remember this when we're going to come into the fine tzoras begadim. So how large of an area has to have this colored skin? Kigris hakilki when it is meruba. Now, Gris Hakilki is approximately the size of an Amerikanische dime. But we're speaking about square. Now, who makai meruba ma'oir habasar kedei tzmicha shloishim v'sheish sa'aros.
This is the same grist that they use for heat.
Yes. Sheish sa'aros oirech v'sheish sa'aros roichav. But the difference is, Nani, by need that's round, and here it has to be bigger. Here you have to have 6 by 6. Now, 6 by 6, I'm giving a jump to Hilchas Mezuzah, right there you have arba by arba. So there's taka machloikas rishonim. If you have a room that is sum total equal arba by arba, but it's 2 by 8. Machloikas. Here there's no machloikas. Here every side has to have the 6 sa'aras. And even if it's very long, but it's skinny, not nisht. Not 6, only 5. Even though it's long and amma, weiter tor. They don't nego tzaras. Achi boy at least at a boy kigris. Chalashura malach la Moshe Sinai halach and tes. Kol makam shnei beheres. Hu adin l'shar arba maroi shaloivim. And then add to it this another layer of the pasuk. For who sheyia hanega kigris or yoised. The size is always going to be the same. No, it's their size. And there's this appearance. That is where we're going to refer to all of the different shades as a baheres. And here the Rambam writes, like we mentioned before, that when you're becoming an expert in what shade white is it, you have to remember that you are comparing. Everything we look at, we're comparing. So you might have something that Taka has that shade. It might not look to you as being so intensely white because it's on an albino. Or you can have something that's not even kikrum beitza, but if it's on a person who's dark skinned, it looks very white. But that will not be that sheer. Baheresh she azak kashelik. It has that shade that is problematic. But I want you to know, says the Rambam, that it will look ba'adam. It's going to look on a albino not so white. Ubeheres shikeya. If you have a beheres that's so dim that it's not problematic, might look on the kushi that it's asa, that it's very white. So when you train, you have to really be aware of it. It's not in comparison of. It's not relative. These are objective, not subjective. Okay. Says the Rambam. So Atkan, it's amazing. Almost the whole chapter was only defining the white with, again, the detail. Shades of white, the size of the white, and this another thing that it has to be amoik ma'oid. It has to look like it's deep, which is what normally would happen. All of that is step number 1. There's got to be a step number 2. Oh. So halacha gimel, halacha yud. Shloisha simani tuma hein b'tzaras oirabasa. When I say simani tuma, aside of the whites, really, aside of the white, you have to have another step. Any one of the 3. Either the hair will then turn white, or inside the whited area, you're going to have healthy flesh appear. That you think that's great. It's not great. It's called a michya, or the area of the tzaras began to spread. And all of these 3 are mentioned explicitly in the Torah. Ketzad, Mishnah beheres, ubasei lavan, or in the beheres there's michyas basar. Spreading is relative. You understand? So when the Kohen saw it the first time, he saw the beheres with the first of the 3. The hair is white. Or he saw it with the second of the 3. Inside that white area, there's a little bit of healthy flesh. Right away, he's vadai tamei. He's confirmed tamei, and that's called muchlat. Remember these words. There's musgar and muchlat. Muchlat, yachlitai. How does he do it? By declaring, by saying tamei. Now, if not this or that, it has the minimum size, but it can be bigger. But he sees it. So now you're going to be musgar. You're quarantined for 7 days. And on the 7th day, means if you came to the Kohen on Monday, he's going to see you again on Sunday, which is the 7th day. Or if it got even a little bit bigger, but it's bigger, now you got the second simon. If neither of the 3 simanim happened, so then Yaskir Shavua Shaniya. So now the Musgar state, Nishtahed, Nishtahin, we'll see the differences in halacha, whether you're Mukhlat or Musgar. Another week. During that second week, and if after the second week nothing changed, even though it didn't get better, so far the Kohen says Tahar and Ve'ifterenu. However, don't think the guy is scot-free because he still has a science rule. So now, 1 second. Now it's spread a little bit. We don't say like if I came to the Kohen and it was 5 inches. You understand? It's not about 5 inches, 2 inches. It's about when he sees it again, did it grow? So even though he sent me a gun, but he knows how big it was. If now it's spread, or if now or if now a little bit of healthy flesh appears in the middle, and it's not considered, Danny, as if he's looking at a nubaheres, because if it will be considered as he's looking at a for the first time, it's not shayach spreading the first time. So even though 2 weeks went, and the Torah says you can't have Muslim more than 2 weeks, so you're free, you're not that free. If something happens later, it's going to be reference to the beginning. Final halacha yudalef, which means that at the highest intensity of white, and not only did it not develop another siman, but it went down in its intensity of white, or in the opposite direction. You came to the Kohen and had the least intensity of white. It didn't get a hair. It did not get a michya. There was no pesaim, but it went up. That's garnished. Nothing. I didn't come She'ein azus hamare simen tuma. The intensity of white, it doesn't mean the second simen. Nor if it dims, it's not a simen taro. What is it, Ella? If it went lower than the intensity of Krumbesa, yeah, that's called a boya. That's something else. That's what it means. It means it became kaya. You know how dim? Not even the lowest. But the right? If after 2 weeks garnished happened, here also the Kohen will declare him to be continued. Easy. So far, easy.
Yeah,